I had been awake for 31 hours when they brought him in. He was tall, with silver skin, and 4 calm eyes that were now wide with fear. His name was Prince Valor of Kethris, and he was the son of a king who ruled a whole star system. But at that moment, he was just my patient, and something inside him was going wrong very fast. I did not think about kings or wars or politics. I only thought about one strange fact. His blood was moving in the wrong direction. It should have been staying inside his body. Instead, it was slowly rising upward, drifting away from the wound like it wanted to escape into the air. This was not magic. It was biology. Kethrian blood is different from ours. It follows a small electric field that every Kethrian body naturally makes. This field is what keeps their blood moving correctly and healing quickly. It is a beautiful system on their home planet. But the device inside his chest that created this field had been damaged. Without it, his blood had no direction to follow. It was floating free, and every second, he was losing more of it. "Get me the diplomatic file," I said, "the one nobody ever reads." My nurse, Priya, looked at me like I had lost my mind. "Dr. Okafor, we do not have time for paperwork. He is fading." "I don't want to read it for fun," I said. "I want the technical pages, the ones that explain how Kethrian royal armor works." I remember reading that their armor carries a small electric charge. That charge helps keep a soldier's blood inside his body during a fight. If I can copy that idea, even roughly, I might be able to hold his blood in place long enough to repair the real problem. The Yaw did not argue anymore. She trusted me, even when my ideas sounded impossible. The trouble was, I did not have any Kethrian equipment. I did not have years of training in their advanced technology. I had a hospital built for humans, filled with ordinary machines meant for ordinary problems. I needed something powerful enough to create an artificial field, something that could act like a giant magnet and calm his wandering blood. Then I remembered the MRI machine down the hall. It was not designed for this. It was built to take clear pictures of human knees, backs, and shoulders. But it was, at its core, an enormous and very powerful magnet. If Kethrian blood responded to magnetic and electric fields, maybe, just maybe, this machine could do the same job as his broken armor, even if it was never meant for anything like this. "Priya," I said, "is the MRI still on from Mrs. Alavi's scan this morning?" "It's powering down," she said. "It won't be ready for regular use." "I don't need it for a normal scan," I told her. "I just need the field turned on." Some of the younger doctors in the room looked at me like I had said something reckless. One of them tried to stop me, saying we could get in serious trouble for using medical equipment in a way it was never approved for. I understood his fear, but I also understood that the prince did not have time for slow committee meetings. He needed help immediately, and the only tool strong enough to help him was sitting unused down the hallway. We moved him quickly. His guards, still shaken from the accident that injured him, watched nervously as we wheeled him into the scanning room. I explained as simply as I could that we were going to use the machine's strong magnetic field to help stabilize him, not to take pictures. There was no time for a long explanation, and honestly, there was no perfect way to explain it. It was new, it was unusual, but it made sense based on what I knew about his biology. I switched the machine to full power. The room filled with a low, steady hum, almost like the sound of a spaceship engine warming up. Slowly, carefully, I watched the monitors. His blood, which had been drifting the wrong way, began to slow down. Then it began to settle. It did not behave exactly like human blood clotting, but it stopped moving away from his body. It stayed close, held gently in place by the field, almost like the way a compass needle settles once it finds north. For the first time since he arrived, I had a clear, steady space to work in. I began repairing the internal damage piece by piece, carefully reconnecting what needed to be reconnected, sealing what needed to be sealed. It was slow, careful work. Every minute felt much longer than it actually was. The room stayed quiet, except for the steady hum of the machine and the soft beeping of the monitors. After what felt like hours, though it was really less than one, his vital signs began to stabilize. His heartbeat became steady. The frightening drop in his numbers slowly turned into a calm, even line. I finally allowed myself to breathe normally again. Someone in the room let out a small, tired laugh. It was not really about anything funny. It was simply relief finding a way out. We had just used a machine built to examine human knees and backs, to help save the life of an alien prince. It was strange, unusual, and completely unplanned, but it had worked. By early morning, the prince was breathing steadily on his own. His condition had moved from dangerous to stable, and everyone in the room finally relaxed just a little. Not long after, his royal guards arrived in shining silver armor, clearly upset and confused about what had happened. They wanted answers immediately. Why had their prince been placed inside a strange human machine? What kind of treatment was this? I stood there in scrubs that had lost their clean white color hours ago, and gave them the simplest, most honest answer I had. I did not have your technology, I said calmly. So I borrowed the idea behind it. I used a machine built for something completely different, because it created the same kind of field your prince's body needed. Their main physician, a calm and serious woman, with more eyes than I was used to seeing, studied the medical readings for a long moment before speaking. You had no device made for his exact biology, she said. How did you know this idea would even work? I didn't know for certain, I admitted, but I understood the basic principle behind his condition. I knew his blood needed a field to guide it, and I looked for the strongest source of a field already inside this building. It was not a perfect solution. It was the best solution I had available at that moment. She did not respond right away, but the next morning, she returned with 3 of her students and asked, quite respectfully, if they could observe me during my regular hospital rounds. I found this a little surprising, since my other patients had nothing unusual about them, just ordinary human illnesses, like infections, fractures, and recovery from minor surgeries. Why would you want to watch that? I asked. On Kethris, she explained, our medical approach is very different from yours. We design a specific tool for each specific problem. Years of careful engineering go into creating exactly the right device for exactly the right situation. It had never occurred to any of us to look around a room and ask what we could adapt from what was already there. 3 days later, the prince woke up fully. He was disoriented at first, and understandably frustrated about how vulnerable his situation had been. Slowly, as his strength returned, he asked who exactly had treated him and how. I introduced myself properly this time. He looked toward a printed image from the MRI scan, which his own doctors had insisted on keeping near his bed, almost like a strange souvenir. He studied it carefully before speaking. Is it true, he asked, that you used a machine meant for examining knees to keep me stable? Technically, I said, trying to keep the moment light, it belongs to a patient named Mrs. Alavi. She is very understanding about sharing it. He did not laugh, not with his mouth the way humans do. Kethrians express humor differently, but something shifted gently across all 4 of his eyes, something close to amusement, or maybe quiet respect. Then he said something that I would remember for a very long time. 6 months later, his words were even included in an official update to the agreement between our 2 worlds, the one that finally allowed human hospitals to be recognized as approved emergency locations for Kethrian travelers and diplomats. On my world, he said, we spend many years designing the exact tool for an exact problem. Your people seem to look at whatever is already around you and challenge it to be enough. I did not have a perfect response to that. Even now, 3 years later, after helping start a small medical exchange program between our 2 peoples, I still do not have one simple answer. It is simply something we do. We look closely at the situation in front of us. We look at whatever tools and resources are already available. And somehow, by working carefully and thinking creatively, we manage to make the 2 come together before the situation becomes too late. It might look, from the outside, like one simple trick. A quick idea, a lucky guess, a clever shortcut, but it never truly feels simple while you are living through it. It feels like hours of careful thinking, fast decisions, and a steady refusal to give up, all happening within just a few intense minutes. Since that night, I have thought about it often. I think about how strange it is that saving a life sometimes does not depend only on having the most advanced or perfect equipment. Sometimes it depends on understanding the deeper idea behind a problem, and then being brave enough to try something unusual with whatever tools happen to be nearby. The prince fully recovered within a few weeks. Before he returned to his homeworld, he visited the hospital one final time, not as a patient, but simply to say thank you in person. He walked slowly through the hallways, looking at ordinary human machines with a new kind of curiosity, as if seeing familiar objects in a completely different light. Before leaving, he paused beside the very same MRI machine that had once saved his life. He looked at it for a long moment, almost respectfully, the way someone might look at an old friend they never expected to meet. "A strange kind of hero," he said quietly, almost to himself. I smiled and simply nodded. In that moment, I understood something important. Progress does not always come from having the most advanced tools in the universe. Sometimes it comes from understanding a problem clearly enough to see new possibilities in ordinary things. That night, an old hospital machine, something usually used for very simple and routine scans, became the reason a future ruler of another world survived. And somehow, that felt like exactly the kind of story worth remembering.